You were born in New Iberia, and your path as an artist has taken you, well, to California for school, and then back to Southwest Louisiana for a long time, I think, and then to Mexico. What is that? I recall the first photographs of yours that stick out in my mind are those photos of the cane fields of southwestern Louisiana. Everything was very kind of dark, and there were fires, and even though there were mechanized devices, somehow the field was almost prehistoric in certain ways. And I was wondering what attracts you, and what really motivates you to photograph in these unusual, sort of slightly primitive places like that?
Well, I'm very, very attracted to fire, for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I presume that's from when I was a child. We were, always having bonfires and or burning leaves, or doing a lot with fire, boiling crawfish and crabs in big pits, with a pot over. And so, I mean, sometimes I think that's one thing. And then I always saw the fields burning as a child.
That's what sticks
And
in my mind.
I was always fascinated. And my grandfather knew a lot of people that raised sugar cane. He knew the people that worked in the mill, and I would go to his house every day after school, and he'd take me out into the fields. And, we'd stay out till sunset and watch the cane burn. And I went to the sugar mills a lot, too, with him. And when I lived in New Iberia, we lived right across from the bayou from a sugar mill.
Mm-hmm.
And so during grinding, my brothers and I would sit on the banks of the bayou, and we'd watch the mill. And we'd watch the sugar being loaded into the barges. And, it smelled so incredible. But we spent our childhood literally on the Bayou Teche playing. And the thing about the grinding season and the loading of the sugar onto the barges was there were always a lot of African American men making sure that the sugar was loaded right. And I was always very worried about them because I knew that most didn't know how to swim.
Mm.
And so we would keep sort of a vigil after school, watching them and making sure no one fell in, and what our plan was going to be if somebody fell in. To the bayou Teche.
Uh-huh.
And it never happened. But, as a kid, your mind things are so much more exaggerated, mm-hmm. I think. And so this scene and the vigil we kept was just a real important part of our life. And, we had seen two men dragged up from the Bayou Teche by my grandmother's house because mm-hmm. they had drowned. And I think that's probably what got us into this. And people were always saying, well, African American people can't swim. And so as a little kid, and my brothers were the same way as I, we were like really paranoid, seeing the scene, of these men on this barge and thinking they can't swim and nobody's watching, and suppose one falls in, the other's not going to be able to save him. And so that's how we spent a lot of time during grinding, just sitting watching. And then we'd dig a lot of holes and bury things. We went to burying rotaries, and they would bury their cowboys and all kind of Catholic stuff. I don't know where we got that from, but we were always burying things relating to the Catholic Church, medals and etc.
That's amazing. So these intense rituals probably gave you a very strong sense of a connection with the people and the drama surrounding the people. And that's what I gather transferred as you worked through the fields of Louisiana with these remarkable photographs that were also poetic and primitive. And then we start seeing more photographs from Mexico. And there again, another Catholic culture, another kind of series of rituals that are connected with the place and the earth. And I recall talking to you before one time about this village that you found in Mexico, where I think a lot of these photographs were taken.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? How did you end up working there?
Well, many years ago, I traveled with one of my photo teachers, and he would take people to Mexico. You know, people would pay him to go to Mexico, and so on one of the trips I went with him, and he was taking a bunch of photographers, and he took us to this village during the Day of the Dead, and I became totally in love with the village because it was so much, the Catholic services in the church were so much like what I'd grown up with. I mean, they're not like that anymore, but like in the old days. And they grow coffee beans in this town. And so the ritual of picking the coffee beans and bringing them in, I mean, it wasn't anything like a sugar mill. They'd bring them into little cantinas. Yeah. And they'd unload them in these rooms that they had next to the cantinas. And so I became just in love with this village and started returning a lot of my own, and with my friend that's mentioned in my book, Martha Posner. She's not a photographer, but she's a painter and sculptor. And so she was very inspired by the village as well. And, you know, on one of our trips, I met the local priest, the guy in charge of all the churches, and I eventually rented a house on the church grounds, and so that really got me into the church life. Yeah. You know, it was fascinating being friends with this priest. You know, it was just incredible because I had access to the church. I had a studio next door to his house, which was a tortilla house, and it was, you know, my house overlooked the church and the graveyard that the pictures in the book are, and just one day by chance, I learned that there was a cantina by my house. It didn't have a sign in front of it. It had a huge gate, but it was a brothel, particularly on Sundays. The prostitutes would go. So I started going and photographing, and it was a world I just was so surprised about because I'd never, you know, been in a brothel before. And I had seen a lot of prostitutes in New Orleans, and especially as a child when I'd go down the quarter with my grandmother, and we'd go to Galatoire's, and I'd say, my grandmother's name was Wow, I'd say, wow, why do those women wear so much makeup, and what are they doing, and, you know, and she'd say, listen, these women are really sinners, and you never want to be like that, and you never want to dress like that. And so she explained to me what they did. And so, you know, it was another situation where I watched a lot. I watched her activity a lot and you know, was fascinated and curious. And so I ended up, because of renting a house from the Catholic priest and living on the Catholic grounds, in a brothel, you know, and seeing the women that I'd see in church in the brothel, you know. And it was uncomfortable and strange, yet it was not as scary as I had expected because of where I was, you know, and how long, you know, I'd been in the community for so long and everybody knew me. And so once I took a lot of pictures there, I decided to go into big cities and really, you know, try and discover what prostitution was all about. And so that got into a much darker, deeper world. And it was, you know, scary at times, but that's how that's how this whole book came about, was from meeting, really, it wasn't I think, you know, I was interested in the village, you know, because of the church and the coffee bean fields, but once I met the priest, everything changed, because I became much more intimately involved. You know.